Hello and welcome to the Weekend Debate. Here we are on another beautiful day in the Isle of Man with a beautiful panel of people all ready to talk to us about the current events of today. And I hope you'll join us over the next hour, probably in 3 sections as usual. And I'd like our guests to introduce themselves. So first of all, to you, Barry.
Hi, Paul. I'm Barry Murphy. I'm a taxi operator here in Douglas, and I've been involved in a campaign to get a fair deal for gas consumers in the Isle of Man. And I also take an active interest in taxis and buses and the operation of such.
We see you quite often here for interviews, and it's been quite a journey. We'll bound to be touching on that as we get on. Chris.
Thanks very much for the invitation and also for this programme that you're building up. It serves a great need. I'm Chris Thomas, one of the MHKs for Douglas Central.
One of the naughty boys at the minute.
Oh, apparently.
And Muriel.
Yes, I'm Muriel Garland. I was born in the Isle of Man and went away to university and stayed away. And then when my husband and I retired, we came back to the island in 2000 and somehow got involved in community activities.
And I know you're passionate that we have more women on this programme, and I read those comments and I do try my best.
I did make a comment.
You do? I know. And I really hope... It's interesting though, isn't it? Because not maybe so many women are always available. I don't know. I get accused of being sexist by saying that. Do you think there's enough women interested in politics?
I think maybe... Oh, yeah. Well, we're improving.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, if you ever want to come on the show, if anyone's out there, just send me something horrible in the comments and I'll pick up on it. You weren't horrible. You just said, more women though. And I thought, yes, why not? Anyway, should we start with talking about the press conference? I think we just start there because it's a great place. It's the thing that keeps on giving almost, isn't it? Did you all have a chance to hear or see it this week? And your comments, I mean... well, yes, come on, Chris, it's chirping with you. You're not the biggest fan of the Chief Minister, so are you going to be critical of him on this?
Yeah, well, the Chief Minister was back this week. I think last week your guests made the good point, which was that it was excellent to hear from the professionals, and I think right from February, March, April, May time, it would have been better to hear more of those professionally qualified. In Guernsey, the whole campaign was led by the Director of Public Health. Likewise, in Jersey, those two people got the MBEs for communicating the messages that needed to be communicated to the public.
Well, I said it was better last week, and I don't mind putting my head above the parapet, because I'm not quite sure why we have to have a history lesson each week of what's gone on in the outer world, which has no control over things, and even Brexit to some degree. However much it sounds like we should be on top of it, no one knows what's happening here. No one has any control over this thing.
No.
Real.
Yes, it's a bit state of the nation, wasn't it? I'm very pleased, as Chris said, that our Director of Public Health is very prominent, because for a while we had virtually invisible directors of public health, but it's good to see her taking a lead there. I'm not a big fan of the press conferences. I'm afraid I don't follow them sort of every time they're on, but I am aware that it was a bit shambolic in the early days, and I did. Well,
don't start me again, because I say every week. It's actually, to be fair, this one nearly went right. Most times we can't hear what's going on.
I did see them when they were in the museum, and I sort of questioned what was going on. But I still don't understand why they haven't got a decent studio somewhere where people can sit down and have a conversation, and the press can be present.
And I gave you no money to say that, because that's what I mean. Because it is different when you're doing it down as a wire in person and being told not to interrupt. And all that sort of thing. Chris, I mean, you'd change things, wouldn't you? You'd mix it up.
Certainly. So the first press conference that the Chief Minister gave when we were first elected, him and I sat next to each other, and we had a live group of journalists there, and they made it a bit awkward for us. And there was one thing that I said that got teased about. I think Chris Robert Shaw even said it nearly made him crash when I said it. But to me, that's the point of a press conference. The media are trained.
It's not an adulation society, which I feel and how many times, and not just me, this presidential look to the whole thing, the feel of it, and how dare you interrupt me, I'm talking, is outrageous if it's meant to be a press conference.
And I went back into Cabinet Office for the first time last week, and I now understand it's in the committee room, which is a large room. It's where all the independent planning inspection discussions are held, and so there's plenty of room there for the press. And another time in the last 4 years was when I launched the the rates reform consultation, there we had the press and members of Tynwald, and I remember being shouted at practically in the council ministers because
you got it a bit
because
on that
Laurie and I had a row, but that was the whole point. The whole point about the rates reform is there's definitely more than one side on what's going to happen to rates. So to me, it was helpful to launch the rates reform so that everybody understood that this wasn't going to be plain sailing. It was actually going to be rough, this consultation, and eventually what happened is what I thought would happen, which is it all petered out because it's really quite hard to reform rates, and you need to.
So the press are there to challenge, and for better or worse, and
but
sometimes it goes.
They're also there to get out the message. The government need the press, don't they, to give different angles on their basic message.
Well, let's talk about the angle. I mean, it was all the vaccine, and I was trying to, because they skated over the timetable, and that's my question gone immediately into trying to get a bit more detail. I feel like I'm doing you or Laurie Hooper's job in the Keys sometimes, just going back and saying, can you just answer that question, please? What does that mean? When are we going to get this?
Yes, and basically they don't know, do they? Until they've done their exercise, working out the logistics of when the vaccine's going to arrive, where it's going to be stored, how it's going to be distributed, they don't know. And there shouldn't be any problem in admitting at this stage, we don't know the details.
That's something will never come out of their mouths.
They're trying to give dates.
They'll never say they don't know.
Before Christmas, before the New Year, it's by next September, everybody will be vaccinated.
Barry.
I've never met Muriel before. I've seen Muriel comment a few times on social media. And
Does
I've
she
always
ever
thought to myself, I always agree with Muriel. I've never met her. And I kind of often thought to myself, you know what, we should really send Muriel a friend request. At least she might think I'm a bit weird. Why is she doing that? But no, I mean, I agree with everything Muriel's saying. I mean, look, I'm just a kind of a lay person. I'm the public as you go, right? So
no, you're not.
Regarding press conferences, I work all night, most nights. So when the press conference comes on, I'm either doing one of two things or two things together. I'm cooking for kids or I'm getting ready for work. So that's the first thing I'll say about it. But when it comes to the press conferences, when the press conferences were first set up for the COVID-19 pandemic, I guess they were set up in a sort of a haphazard fashion. That something had to be set up pretty rapid and you
totally.
And I understand that. And I thought to myself, you know what a great idea. This is really good. But you know what? We're 7 months down the line, maybe now, 6 months down the line, and nothing has changed. So I totally agree with what all three of you are saying, simply that, the press should be in the room because it's very difficult sometimes to hear what the panelists, the question panel are saying. To me, it almost comes across quite unprofessional, even though I know you're totally professional.
Oh no! But and it jammed last week. The one before, not the one just had. The one before just jammed on everyone bar one site. There was no pictures moving or something. It was complete and utter chaos. And it said it was a wedding of the Baroness Barrowman underneath. They had done another job and obviously hadn't changed the name back. But I mean, I don't get stuck on this because I know it's a thing of mine. But it's interesting to hear you guys saying this as well. But why don't are they not listening?
I only have one thing I would like. What I think about it. Right, this is what I think about it. It's 2020, and all this pandemic, COVID-19 tragedy, started at the end of March, and the world, the Isle of Man, the UK, Europe is in a very bad place, and we mustn't forget that. And of course, the most important thing is very, very many people, even very close to home here, it's been tragic. But the Isle of Man is actually in a very good situation. So I'm self-employed. I drive a taxi. My wife is she's a beauty therapist. So my taxi was off the road for 3 months. My wife's business was shut down for nearly 3 months. And
3 months with no pay coming in.
Pretty much. Well, we got a little bit of money from the government, but nowhere near enough. And I've also got a 4-star self-catering property on the island, which I've done for 3 years. So basically, all three of them were pretty much wiped off the financial map. So 2020 for me has been an absolute disaster. So whilst I've been trying to carry on with the whole gas situation, in all honesty, family-wise, it's been really tough. But all I really want now is, when the press conference comes on, is to know what is the action plan coming out of this. I don't longer kind of understand or recognise the need to understand why we're being told all the information we are. You know,
the history lesson we call it. We go, here you go,
Yeah.
the history for the last week's events, world events, now coming out of our chief minister's mouth, who cannot alter anything. We already know what's going on.
Yeah.
Why waste? He's getting badly advised. Don't you think? It's a badly advised communications going on somewhere. I think, Chris.
Well, I think we all accept that, but I just want to say something positive about the communications programme, because Minister Ashford is actually a very good communicator, and I think at a certain moment we really, really did need that clear communication, and we still will again. So that part is something that I think we should hold for the future.
You're right. Let's be positive about this.
Because, and I do remember in April I was running still quite a lot, and I was running along the promenade and along around Marine Drive, and I just couldn't believe how many people were actually in cars just listening to the press conference in those crucial days in April, and that was really, really noticeable. But I think we needed to grow out of that. That was the time for sort of, learning the lessons of authoritarian regimes and propaganda and making sure the message was clear. But then there's a time for real debate and real discussion and a free press and real challenge from politicians and the press and the public. And we're now back in that time, rather than those dark days back in March and April where there were a lot of unknowns, and we needed a simple message communicated well. And that's what Minister Ashford managed to do particularly. I would have preferred it from the Director of Public Health at the time. I would have preferred it from professionals to do other things, but hey,
what about having the photo call? Do you think we'll have a photo call here in the Isle of Man, the first person getting the jab, just like Boris still sends out for everyone over there?
Yeah.
Do you think? But I don't know. Well, I'm way down. I'm 66. I get mine in September next year. I think I'm 60, so I'm way down.
I think, in fact, one of the worst moments probably was when the Lieutenant Governor joined in the sad announcement of the first COVID-19 death. I'm not sure quite that was appropriate at the time, and I think he seemed to me to be a bit uncomfortable about.
I thought that was completely bizarre. I mean, we weren't told what it was. We were just told that the Governor would be on it, so we all speculated. But and then how it's incredibly sad. Of course it is. Someone's died. But then number 2 dies, 3, 4. That makes it all just a number, which of course it's not to many people. But yeah.
So I think we've got to capture the positives from it, which is clear message. And Minister Ashford's got a great career ahead of him. He's proved himself as a politician in difficult times, but now I think he's now got to reprove himself as being able to go back into the idea of democracy and being challenged and accepting criticism and so on, which is it's very hard to move from a propaganda-based regime to a democratic discussion.
Are you calling it North Korea? That's what I used to say. On this section, let's talk a bit about fisheries, though, because that is one thing that really is going to potentially have an impact. The gunboats could be out off our shores here. The UK could override all protocols with the Isle of Man. Certainly Jersey and Guernsey are much more affected by this. Do you think we have any say in this? Do you think
they were on the ball a bit quicker, weren't they? Jersey and Guernsey seemed to react to it more quickly than the Isle of Man did.
They yelled about it. That's certainly they were causing newsprints.
But nobody here was saying at that point it's going to affect or could affect the Isle of Man.
Yes.
Well, I think I actually had to remind the Chief Minister in the question time that there was a constitutional aspect of all of this, because the Chief Minister just said it didn't. We were happy with the UK's position that it was taking, whereas Jersey and Guernsey weren't, and he repeated that. But there is the precedent, the constitutional precedent, which is that the Isle of Man determines its own affairs, except when it puts the Queen and the United Kingdom into an embarrassing position internationally.
This could be major, though, couldn't it? Technically, this could be the one thing that hasn't really dealt with here.
It could be really major, and those sorts of issues like fisheries have often come up in Manx political history alongside the BBC and broadcasting, because that's where domestic and international merges into one. And I started off with a strong statement about the BBC and rejigging the licence fee attribution, and fisheries is like that. It's about the extent of our territorial seas.
And although it's a very small part of our economy, it's sort of iconic, isn't it? It's symbolic for an island nation. Of course it is, yeah.
Well, I think I don't care what the point is. I think it's if the UK starts overriding us, or potentially has the way of overriding us on anything.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a matter for hang on, back off, wouldn't it?
And sometimes it's bad, like it seemed to me to be back for the broadcasting days back in the 60s. Sometimes it can be good, because I'm sure there are many Manx people who are terribly embarrassed about what was going on in the 70s, 80s and 90s with some pretty underdeveloped social policies that we had and so on and so on.
Such polite words.
So therefore
you've got birching and homosexuality and all those.
So therefore it was good. It was good that international standards were, for 6 or 7 years there were people in the Isle of Man, high up politicians, who believed the Human Rights Convention didn't apply in the Isle of Man, and we're on record as saying that. Well, that can't be right either, and so on.
No.
Barry?
I'm not very well up to speed with it. I'm listening and I'm learning.
Yeah. But you must have so many things in your taxis.
Got to be here for something like this. And what the governor of the Isle of Man, he lives just up the road here. Surely Minister Boot and the governor of the Isle of Man should be able to sit down and discuss all of this. And I would imagine that if the livelihoods of hundreds, if not thousands, of people are going to be affected by this, I mean, the fisher people need to get up and they need to start shouting a bit more about it, because, you know, I do take an active interest in what's gone on locally. I have heard something about this, but in all honesty, if they're going
the club, I don't think anyone has.
Taxi business,
no one's calling.
I'm knocking on doors.
No one's talking about it, are they? That's what I'm saying. No one seems to be.
This is the unfortunate thing about the Isle of Man, and you know, a lot of people have said a lot of things to me, both positive and negative about what I've done with gas and what I didn't do about gas. But if nothing else, at least I got it out into the public arena and made people aware.
We'll talk about the next section.
I'm certainly not very aware of I have heard something about this.
Yeah.
But this is a political issue. I mean, you see, everything to me is delayed by what's happened in 2020. Because you know what, this paperwork in front of me today, every time I look through this, there's always a referral back to the COVID pandemic. Everything is affected by that. But you know, we have to move on. We have to have an exit strategy out of all of this. We're coming into a new year, new start, and hopefully, you know, new fortunes.
I'm pleased the fisheries protection vessel is being used because my brother used to work for the government, and he was the fisheries officer. So he used to go out occasionally on the Barul, was it? Yes.
Well, it'd be interesting to see who's going to have a face-off with, you know, any Russians or no, not them. It'll be the French or something coming in.
Just three small points. Because I can see you're itching to end the first 20 minutes, perhaps. And three brief points. One part that I felt frustrated with about the COVID-19 response relates to what we're just talking about, which is the application of international conventions and norms and so on, because I do think we'll have to reflect in the Isle of Man on how we used custody, putting people in prison, and we'll have to reflect on some of the diminution of sort of some basic rights to do with how we treated certain people during the process.
In the early days.
In the early days, and also carrying on, because I was quite surprised about how the people seemed to be supporting the politicians to do certain things, whereas I would have thought they would have done the opposite, given how I've observed Manx people reacting to certain
Which about
things.
then or now, though?
So essentially putting too many people into prison, you know, rather than giving them large fines, putting people into prison, you know, people being alone in prison cells for most of the day for 2 weeks, people who just basically had profound social issues being put in prison as well. So there was lots of encouraging window twitching, curtain twitching, and so on and so on. All these are things that trouble me. So perhaps that is the society we want in the island, but that's not what I've observed in the island, so we need to reflect on it. And the other 2 points, you know, you brought up fisheries. The other two major issues that are going on in the EU negotiations at the moment are about the level playing field and about sovereignty. We've hinted at sovereignty, which is about where we are in terms of Isle of Man sovereignty relative to the UK and also beyond. And the other one is level playing field. I hope we get some time to think about that issue through this discussion, because the level playing field affects us in the island. You know, I'm vice chair of the post office. We have a good pension scheme. We have good terms. Our profitability is affected by other people not having such good terms and not such good pensions and not having such obligations to the environment and to the community that we have, and that's to do with the level playing field. I love to talk about transport in that sense as well during the programme. And these are all the issues that people are listening to on the 6 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news, wherever they're getting their news from, because the level playing field issue is massive between the UK and the EU at the moment, and I think it is also quite large here on the island.
So are we in difficult times, you think? Challenging times more than have done for some time?
Very much so. I mean, basically COVID-19, climate change, and basically the forces building up towards the next recession are all going to hit at once, and 2021, 2022, 2023 are going to be incredibly difficult years for us, unfortunately.
But life in the Isle of Man goes on in our bubble, and you know, and hats off to everyone that happened to make that happen. Don't you think?
Yeah, it won't do then when there come to be difficulties in delivering things.
Not for the tourism sector,
from Europe to the Isle of Man.
Yeah, tourism sector's in dire straits at the minute. You know.
I know. I was just trying to put a nice spin on it a little bit.
But you see, this is the thing. Very quickly to touch on that. You know, I mean, I am involved in that market. You know, that's the other thing that I do that helps me to provide a living for my wife and my kids. So, you know, for what we in December? So for 7 months, 8 months now, you know, we've got a property in Douglas which is virtually empty most of the time. We've come through a whole season of just refunding back thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of bookings, and I'm now in a situation last couple of days where I've been printing off bank statements to send it to the Department of Enterprise, who want to dive deep into my financial affairs to see which creditors I've been paying and which ones I haven't, to get a subsidy or whatever you want to call it for £1,000, which to me is a load of nonsense. But you know what? I could do with £1,000, but all I want now is the bright start for 2020. Yeah, you know, it's weird for me because yes, I'm driving my taxi right now at night time, and I have to say it's actually pretty good out there. You've got a taxi driver who, if somebody says, "Are you busy?" I'll say, "Well, yeah, you know what, it is quite busy at the minute." But the tourism sector, you know, this going back to the press conferences, week on week, this whole subject about 2021 for tourism, there's nobody discussing this. I've got a house I need to be, you know, advertising on Airbnb, on Booking.com, locally, internationally, TripAdvisor, to try to sell dates, to try to sell holidays to people. I want to advertise it because I can't go back into 2021 refunding thousands and thousands of pounds of bookings. I'm not going to do that for anybody.
What about Safe Vacationers though? Because I know some people have picked up some good business from that.
You see, I do know the answer to that, but you have to think about what I'm saying in my situation. So when it came back to the press conferences and the information coming out from government regarding tourism, nobody knew, first and foremost, when the COVID-19 pandemic was going to finish. So I had bookings for 6 months, 7 months in my calendar. And so when everything went into shutdown at the end of March, was I supposed to take it upon myself to refund all them bookings then? Or should I wait until April, March? March, April, May, June, July. When did I do it? So what I done is I carried them on and on and on and on. And I just refunded them month on month. So by the time we got to September, I was still carrying bookings. So I didn't have any vacancies anyway, because my calendar was jammed up. So by the time the summer season finished, at the staycation season, I didn't really have any availability. So I'd be interested to know how many other holiday accommodation providers were like me. If I had known in March, for instance, that the 2020 season was going to be a write-off, I could have refunded all of the money then, and then I would have been able to get a bit of money at the end of the year. But no, it wasn't for me.
Without dipping to TT again, which we did the whole week, I mean, you know, they made a very early decision on that.
It's a huge loss for people.
But that leaves you not hanging, I guess, for your TT bookings. At least you know that's all off.
Well, it just leaves you hanged, really, because you know, I mean, it's a short season. So the truth is, a good TT booking is probably the equivalent of 3 months of non-TT bookings. It's a big payout, you know. So it's a major loss. So even if we manage to get somebody to come and stay for a week or two in the end of May, June, in fairness, it's probably only going to be 5th or 6th or 7th of what the TT booking would be. You know, it's a big payout. If you don't get the big payout, you can't stay in business, you know. So,
all right, well, we're going to leave it there for this section, and thank you again. We'll have more, part 2.
Please like and subscribe to the Isle of Man TV channel. Thank you.